Screwtape on the internet. So I'm a little salty. Do you know why I'm a little salty? Because I read 4 chapters of the Screwtape letters, and in the recording it cut from the little synopsis of it to like the 4th chapter. And that's not the way story time goes, ladies and gentlemen. So I will swallow my saltiness and I will do this again, but in film form. Right, okay, so this is the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, and I was supposed to read this for an hour, but I have like 16 minutes left, so I think I can read for 16 minutes. What about you? You know what, heck, sure. Okay, and go. I have a timer. Look how smart and resourceful I am. Okay. Right, synopsis. Would be nice so you all know what you're getting yourselves into. This classic has entertained and enlightened readers the world over with its sly and ironic portrayal of human life and foibles from the unique vantage point of Screwtape, a highly placed assistant to Our Father Below. By the way, Our Father Below is the devil. At once widely comic, deadly serious, and strikingly original, C.S. Lewis gives us the correspondence of the world-wise devil to his nephew Wormwood, a novice demon in charge of securing the damnation of an ordinary young man. The Screwtape Letters is the most engaging account of temptation and triumph over it ever written. So let me give you like the little overview. Okay, so this is written from the perspective of a devil, which means Our Father Below is the devil, and quote unquote the enemy, which is in all caps, is God. Because C.S. Lewis is very philosophical. He used to be an atheist, actually, but then he became a Christian. So by technicality, this is a Christian book, but on other terms, it is not. It's a very interesting read. I highly suggest it. Alright, preface. I have no intention of explaining how the correspondence which I now offer to the public fell into my hands. There are 2 equal and opposite errors in which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves are equally pleased by both errors, and hail a materialistic or a magician with the same delight. The sort of script which is used in this book can be very easily obtained by anyone who has once learned the knack, but ill-disposed of excitable people who might make a bad use of it shall not learn it from me. Readers are advised to remember that the devil is a liar. Not everything that Screwtape says should be assumed to be true even from his own angle. I have made no attempt to identify any of the human beings mentioned in the letters, but I think it very unlikely that the portraits say, I think that's Firespike. Firespike, or the patient's mother, are wholly just. There's wishful thinking in hell as well as on earth. In conclusion, I ought to add that no effort has been made to clear up the chronology of the letters. Number 17 appears to have been composed before rationing became serious. But in general, the diabolical method of dating seems to bear no relation to terrestrial time, and I have not attempted to reproduce it. The history of the European war, except in so far as it happens now and then to impinge upon the spiritual condition of one human being, was obviously of no interest to Screwtape. C.S. Lewis, Magdalen College, July 5th, 1941. Holy crap, that was a long time ago. Okay, Screwtape, let's see what you have to say to your dear Wormwood. My dear Wormwood, I note that you say about guiding your patient's reading and taking care that he sees a good deal of his materialistic friend. But are you not being a trifle naive? It sounds as if you suppose that argument was the way to keep him out of the enemy's clutches. This might have been so if he had lived a few centuries earlier. At that time, the humans still knew pretty well when a thing was proved, and when it was not. And if it was proved, they really believed it. They still connected thinking with doing, and were prepared to alter their way of life as a result of a chain of reasoning. But what with the weekly press and other such weapons, we have largely altered that. Your man has been accustomed ever since he was a boy to have a dozen incompatible philosophies dancing about together inside of his head. He doesn't think of doctrines as primarily true or false, but as academic or practical, outworn or contemporary, conventional or ruthless. Jargon, not argument, is your best ally to keep him from the church. Don't waste time trying to make him think that materialism is true. Make him think he is strong or stark or courageous. That it is the philosophy of the future. That's the sort of thing he cares about. There we go. Okay. The trouble about argument is that it moves the whole struggle onto the enemy's own ground. He can argue too, whereas in really practical propaganda of the kind I am suggesting, he has been shown for centuries to be greatly the inferior of our Father below. By the very act of arguing, you awaken the patient's reasoning, and once it is awake, who can foresee the result? Even if a particular train of thought can be twisted so as to end in our favor, you will find that you have been strengthening in your patient the fatal habit of attending to universal issues and withdrawing his attention from the stream of immediate sense experiences. Your business is to fix his attention on the stream. Teach him to call it real life, and don't let him ask about what he means by real. Remember, he is not like you, a pure spirit. Never having been a human, oh, that abominable advantage of the enemies, you don't realize how enslaved they are to the pressure of the ordinary. I once had a patient, a sound atheist, who used to read in the British Museum. One day, as he sat reading, I saw a train of thought in his mind beginning to go the wrong way. The enemy, of course, was at his elbow in a moment. Before I knew where I was, I saw my 20 years' work beginning to totter. If I had lost my head and begun to attempt a defense by argument, I should have been undone. But I was not such a fool. I struck instantly at the part of the man which I had best under my control and suggested that it was just about time he had some lunch. The enemy presumably made the counter-suggestion. You know how one can never quite overhear what he says to them. This was more important than lunch. At least, I think that must have been his line, for when I said quite, in fact, much too important to tackle at the end of the morning, the patient brightened up considerably, and by that time I had added, much better come back after lunch and go into it with a fresh mind. He was already halfway through the door. Once he was in the street, the battle was won. I showed him a newsboy in the street. I showed him a newsboy shouting the midday paper, and a number 73 bus going past. And before he reached the bottom of the steps, I got into him an unalterable conviction that whatever odd ideas might come into a man's head when he was shut up alone with his books, a healthy dose of real life, by which he meant the bus and the newsboy, was enough to show him that all that sort of thing couldn't be true. He knew he'd had a narrow escape, and in later years was fond of talking about that inarticulate sense of actuality, which is our ultimate safeguard against the aberrations of mere logic. He is now safe in our Father's house. You begin to see the point. Thanks to processes which we set at work in them centuries ago, we find it all but impossible to believe in the unfamiliar while the familiar is set before their eyes. Keep pressing home on him the ordinariness of things. Above all, do not attempt to use science, I mean the real sciences, as a defense against Christianity. They will positively encourage him to think about realities he can't touch or see. There have been sad cases among the modern physicists. If he must dabble in science, keep him on economics and sociology, dang it. Don't let him get away from that invaluable real life. But the best of all is to let him read no science, but to give him a grand general idea that he knows it all, and that everything he happens to have picked up in casual talk and reading is the result of modern investigation. Do remember, you are there to fuddle him. From the way some of you young fiends talk, anyone would suppose that it was our job to teach. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. Alright, I'm going to read the second one just because I can't. My dear Wormwood, I note with grave displeasure that your patient has become a Christian. Do not indulge the hope that you will escape the usual penalties. Indeed, in your better moments, I trust you would hardly even wish to do so. In the meantime, you must make the best of the situation. There is no need to despair. Hundreds of these adult converts have been reclaimed after a brief sojourn in the enemy's camp and are now with us. All the habits of the patient, both mental and bodily, are still in our favor. One of our great allies at present is, well, the church itself. Do not misunderstand me. I do not mean the church as we see her spread out through all time and space and rooted in eternity, terrible as an armor with banners. That, I confess, is a spectacle which makes our boldest tempters uneasy. But, fortunately, it is quite invisible to these humans. All your patient sees is the half-finished sham Gothic erection on the new building estate. When he goes inside, he sees the local grocer with rather an oily expression on his face, bustling up to offer him one shiny little book containing a liturgy which neither of them understands, and one shabby little book containing corrupt text of a number of religious lyrics, mostly bad, in a very small print. When he gets to his pew and looks around him, he sees just that selection of his neighbors whom he has hitherto avoided. You want to lean pretty heavily on those neighbors. Make his mind flit to and fro between an expression like the body of Christ and the actual faces in the next pew. It matters very little, of course, what kind of people the next pew really contain. You may know one of them to be a great warrior on the enemy's side. No matter. Your patient, thanks to our Father below, is a fool. Provided that any of those neighbors sing out of tune or have boots that squeak, or double chins or odd clothing, the patient will quite easily believe that their religion must therefore be somehow ridiculous. At his present stage, he has the idea of Christians in his mind that he supposes to be spiritual. but which in fact is largely pictorial. His mind is full of togas and sandals and armor and bare legs, and the mere fact that the other people in church wear modern clothes is a real, though of course an unconscious, difficulty to him. Never let it come to the surface. Never let him ask what he expected them to look like. Keep everything lazy in his mind now, and you will have all eternity wherein to amuse yourself, by producing in him the peculiar kind of clarity which hell affords. Work hard, then, on the disappointment or anticlimax which is certainly coming to the patient during his first few weeks as a churchman. The enemy allows this disappointment to occur on the threshold of every human endeavor. It occurs when a boy who has been enchanted in the nursery by stories from the Odyssey buckles down to really learning Greek. It occurs when lovers have gotten married and begin the real task of learning to live together. In every department of life, it marks the transition from dreaming aspiration to labor's doing. The enemy takes this risk because he has a curious fashion of making all these disgusting little human virgin into what he calls his free lovers and servants. Sons is the word he uses, with his invertent love of degrading the whole spiritual world by unnatural liaisons with the two-legged animals. Desiring their freedom, he therefore refuses to carry them, by their mere affections and habits, to any of the goals which he has set before them. He leaves them to do it on their own. And there lies our opportunity. But also remember, there lies our danger. If once they get through this initial dryness successfully, they become much less dependent on emotion and therefore much harder to tempt. I've been writing hitherto on the assumption that the people in the next... Oh, there we go. And the people in the next pew afford no rational ground for disappointment. Of course, if they do, the patient knows that the woman with the absurd hat is a fantastical bridge player, or the man with squeaky shoes a miser, an extortioner. Then your task is so much easier. All you then have to do is to keep out of his mind the question, if I, being what I am, can consider that I am in some sense a Christian, why should the different vices of those people in the next pew prove that their religion is mere hypocrisy and convention? You may ask whether it is possible to keep such an obvious thought from occurring even to a human mind. It is, Wormwood. It is. Handle him properly, and it simply won't come into his head. He has not been anything like long enough with the enemy to have any real humility yet. What he says, even on his knees about his own sinfulness, is all parrot talk. At bottom, he still believes he has run up a very favorable credit balance in the enemy's leisure by allowing himself to be converted, and thinks that he is showing great humility and condescension in going to church with these smug, commonplace neighbors at all. Keep him in that state of mind as long as you can. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. That was chapter part 1 and 2, and the reason why I did like a pilot episode was because I'm going to be doing this on a regular basis. And this is like a pilot episode, so see if you want to see it on it. Hope y'all enjoy my little read. Yeah, reread, yeah. Yeah. I find this particularly fascinating, not because I'm like a humongous fan of demonic activity, where I'm not exactly a humongous fan of that. The reason why I find this so fascinating is because you always hear it from the other perspective, from the godly, the Christian perspective. But the Screwtape letters, they show it from the demon's perspective. And I find it interesting that even when C.S. Lewis was writing this, I think he said he had to do it in bits and pieces because it was hurting his heart to write like this. It was painful for him to write like this, but he knew he had to get this out into the world. So you could see, perhaps, what things are from the devil's perspective. So that's why this is a pilot episode to see if you want more of this. I mean, I'll do it regardless, but whatever. Well then, bye-bye, your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.